When people in Liberia started dying from a mysterious disease in late 2013, it took 3 months to identify that disease as Ebola. Let that sit, Ebola. 3 months. Why did it take so long? A couple of reasons, and these stood out to me. Research articles that would have warned and prepared the region for a possible Ebola outbreak were hidden in journals locked behind paywalls. So when you went to click on the article, you had to spend $50, $45 to access it. And $45, that's half a week's pay for a doctor in Liberia. Not only that, those articles, they were published in the 1980s. The 80s, 30 years earlier, it was known that a possible outbreak could happen in that region. Another factor, those articles were not co-written by scientists in Liberia. Instead, European researchers came into the area, took the samples, went back home, and published their findings in European medical journals. That knowledge, it was lost. It was lost to the people who would be impacted the most. As a result, the virus spread, more people became infected, and more people died. Before the World Health Organization declared the outbreak over in May of 2015, more than 11,000 people had died, and the virus had spread to 7 other countries: Italy, Mali, Nigeria, Spain, Senegal, United Kingdom, and the United States. No country is immune from a deadly virus. The Ebola crisis was subsiding. Another virus was beginning to spread, Zika. Zika is transmitted by mosquitoes, and if infected, you have mild flu-like symptoms, and you're out for about a week, no big deal. However, if you are pregnant or planning to become pregnant, it is a very big deal. The virus feeds on the brain tissue of the fetus, and your baby will be born with microcephaly, an abnormally small head. Your baby will have severe intellectual disability and developmental delays. The way the world communicates science is failing us. It failed the 11,000 people who died of Ebola and the thousands of parents and babies who were infected with Zika. How many more lives could have been saved from Ebola, and how many more babies could have been spared of Zika if only the current system rewarded sharing information and made it freely available? We, the taxpayers, all of us here, we fund scientists to the tune of $60 billion to help us solve some of the world's biggest problems, to eradicate malaria, to eradicate polio, to finding alternatives to fossil fuels. We love our scientists. We have the power to unleash the total power of research, to use artificial intelligence, to scan the millions of documents of data, to make inferences and connections that humans just cannot make. We have the opportunity to unleash the total power of research. But we can't. We can't because we use a 350-year-old print-based model to communicate science. The process goes something like this. A researcher has an idea, she's funded, she develops a hypothesis, she designs experiments, collects her data, analyzes it, has conclusions, and is ready to share her findings. So that would be awesome. You want to share it as soon as possible. So then, this is how she does it. She goes, she looks for a journal, searches for a journal among the 26,000 journals that are out there. She finds one in her field that she's going to submit to. And then when she submits her article, it goes into this black box of closed peer review. It comes out on the other end maybe 6 months, 8 months, 12 months later. And it was accepted. That's great. And now she's publishing Her article is published, and she's really excited, and when she goes to see her published article, she gets hit with a paywall. The person who submitted the research to the journal actually has to pay in order to get access to her published article. And if rejected, she has to go through that whole process again and again until it is accepted. Second, our scientists are incentivized to withhold their data. They don't want to share their data because they are rewarded with promotion and tenure by how many articles they publish. So instead of sharing their data at that point of conclusion, they go through that whole journal process. It's a real big bummer. 75% of the research that we fund with our taxpayer dollars is hidden behind that paywall. Only available to those top universities and institutions that can afford to pay the subscription fees. And those fees run in the millions of dollars. This highlights a divide, a privilege divide. Those of us who don't belong to an institution, like most of us here, and those who live in lower income countries are locked out unless they want to pay, unless we can all afford to pay $45 for each and every article. And it just doesn't make sense. Science and scientists, they're very smart. Science, a collection of disciplines that is supposed to advance human knowledge, is hindering itself by holding on to these antiquated norms. It's actually leaning into a centuries-old print-based model rather than updating for current technology. And worst of all, countries hit hardest by diseases like malaria, Ebola, Zika are least likely to access those articles that would help us stop those diseases. The injustice of this system drives me nuts. People without privilege are dying because of it. I am appalled that it's taking too long for us to reimagine a new system. And I am outraged that the system is stacked against those who don't have money or privilege. When everyone has access to knowledge, it's great for everyone. We benefit from these minds from across the globe, brilliant minds. We can take advantage of everyone, right? Not in a bad way, but in a good way. And when you level the playing field, when you make knowledge available to everyone, it does level the playing field. And I know from experience. Growing up in a small town, yes, that is the small town of John Cougar Mellencamp, the small town, Seymour, Indiana. We both grew up there. It was very clear who had money and who didn't. And my family, we didn't. I didn't have access to college mentors or SAT prep courses or private tutors. But I did have access to the public library. Seymour Public Library. At 14, I was hired as a library page, and I walked up those steps 3 times a week and entered the library's awesome knowledge and information. It was open to me. It didn't care that I was a girl, and it didn't care that I didn't have money. Because of the public library, I was able to forge my own path. Because of the public library, I had individual agency. And when you don't provide that same agency to our researchers, we hinder their ability to make that one connection that would have stopped Ebola. When we reward our researchers for withholding their data rather than sharing it, we slow down scientific discovery. And when we lock out those who cannot afford to pay to access these articles and this research, we lose the ability to tap into their genius. And while you can't predict genius, You can create a system that enables genius. Reinventing the scholarly communication system may be a daunting task. However, it is not impossible. Research funders from across the world understand the importance of sharing information. So much so that when scientists wanted to map and sequence the genes of the human species, they required scientists to share their discoveries within 24 hours. 24 hours. The result? $965 billion of economic output in just 24 years. We now have new DNA screening tests to help us identify colon cancer and breast cancer earlier. And we now know the role of genes in diseases like cystic fibrosis, diabetes, and cancer. My organization, we mandated 2 years ago that all of our research be published immediately without barrier or restriction, no exceptions. The Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, they announced last year that they are going to map the human cell. The Human Cell Atlas will be freely available to everyone. Think of what we did with the Human Genome Project, and imagine what we can do when we map the human cell. The Allen Institute for Brain Science already has mapped the human brain. This means that researchers can dive right into what they're studying instead of mapping the brain and then jumping in. Researchers can start faster to study Alzheimer's and depression and ADHD. But funders alone cannot mandate the sharing of research. It just doesn't work that way. We need the entire scientific community to come together to reinvent this system. From funders to academic institutions to scientists to publishers. A system that rewards our researchers for sharing their information as soon as possible. A system that moves beyond the individual article and makes raw data available in real time for real-time decision-making. A system that is open and freely available to everyone. I firmly believe that a more equitable and innovative world begins and ends with barrier-free access to knowledge. Knowledge is humanity's right. It is for us and it is by us. It is not a sacred commodity only available to those who can afford to access it. Research behind a paywall benefits only a few. It thwarts discovery and collaboration. Not long ago, the Washington Post put a new motto on its website: "Democracy dies in darkness." I believe the same is true for science. Science withers and dies in the darkness. Discovery can only happen in the light. Only in the light can you see the interplay of ideas and have those unexpected connections. We will never know if having access to those articles from the 1980s, we don't know if it would have stopped the most recent Ebola outbreak that killed so many. But hands down, always, I believe I would take light every single time. Thank you.